The Ministries of the Tripartite Soul, a presentation by Yisela and Chloe Peterson. So, what is the tripartite soul? The tripartite soul came from Plato's book, Book 4. To him, the soul is an entity that serves as the seat of human activity. He stresses that the soul is not made up of material goods, but it's more of internal desires that motivate the body as a whole. The three elements of the soul are rational, spirited, and appetitive. These elements made up who someone is and why they do the actions that they do. This infographic describes all of the elements it relates to in the body and a secondary descriptor. The rational aspect, also regarded to as the logical, is pointing at the brain, and it's known to seek truth and is swayed by facts and arguments. The spirited is also known as emotional. It points to the heart and is how feelings fuel your actions. And appetitive obviously points to your digestive system, and it represents physical desires and what drives you to do the basic human functions, which is to eat, have sex, and protect yourself. So, what did Orwell think of Plato? Well, Plato's ideal government was a totalitarian state where philosopher kings ruled over the common people. Orwell did not agree with this state. He cared more about the ordinary, more common people, while Plato idolized the philosophers. In Plato's ideal state, it also reflects the ideal man. Even though Orwell did not agree with this government, he did agree with the idea of an ideal man, which is to have reason, courage, and appetite.
How does it relate to 1984? In 1984, the party works to eliminate freedoms through the form of limiting wisdom, emotion, and desires. This is a complete reconstruction of the tripartite soul concept. In Plato's allegory of the cave, he illustrates the ignorance of mankind. In this illustration, the party is holding up false images that the citizens of Oceania blindly believe and follow. Winston, in this illustration, represents the philosopher who questions. Working in the Ministry of Truth, Winston begins to question things and tries to find out the truth. The party limits wisdom through the Ministry of Truth, which controls the citizens by making them believe in an artificial common sense. The first part of Plato's tripartite soul is the rational part, which includes the wisdom. While working in the Ministry of Truth, Winston came to realize that 3 prisoners were forced by the party to confess to false crimes. He says, but this was concrete evidence. It was a fragment of the past. It was enough to blow the party to atoms. Winston is beginning to realize that the party is limiting wisdom by manipulating the past. On page 69, Winston says, in the end, the party would announce that 2 and 2 make 5, and you would believe it. The heresies of the heresies was common sense. Winston is saying that the party creates an artificial common sense, and it was frightening because one did not know if things were right and wrong. It was just common sense. Moreover, the Ministry of Peace worked to put out propaganda that desensitized and normalized the citizens seeing death. They were able to control the people's emotions and make it less likely for them to question why people were being executed. The Ministry of Peace did this by constantly showing propaganda. On page 84, it says, Winston knew the place well. It was a museum used for propaganda displays, rocket bombs, and floating fortresses. Waxwork tableaux illustrated enemy atrocities and the likes. Winston himself was a victim of this. While having a conversation with Syme, he states that the hanging in the morning was spoiled because they had tied the feet together. He says, I like to see them kicking, the tongue sticking right out and the blue, quite bright blue. That's a detail that appeals to me. Syme explicitly says that he enjoys seeing the murders, showing that death was normalized. It was so normalized that even the children would beg to see the hangings. On page 22, Winston witnesses a bombing that happened about 200 feet ahead of him. He walks, he sees, and says, it was a human hand severed at the wrist. He then continues to walk on, and it says that he kicked the thing into the gutter. Winston simply walked away from the bombing and didn't even go check on anyone or go to help. He wasn't even worried about whose hand it was, he simply kicked it into a gutter.
The third element, appetite, also known as desire. The Ministry of Plenty is represented as a total erasure of all individual wants or needs. In our first quote, it reads, "At any given moment, there was some necessary article which the party shops were unable to supply." Before I go into the mean, I'm also going to read the second quote. "There had never been quite enough to eat. One had never had socks or underclothes that were not full of holes. This was not the natural order of things." These two quotes describe how the party is in total control of what citizens of Oceania receive and what they wear and what they eat. People wanted razors and buttons, but all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the government, the party, had restricted that and said that they were low on it and just didn't give them out. The party was deciding what citizens needed and wanted, which totally interfered with their personal desires. While Yisela and I were researching, we came across something that was interesting, which was the Tripartite Pact. It occurred in World War II between Germany, Italy, and Japan, but was signed in Berlin. To us, we did not believe that it was a coincidence that Orwell would write this book post World War II and then bring up a large part of philosophy that shared the same name with the pact. So, our question is, do you think Orwell purposefully referenced the tripartite soul because of the Nazi pact?